questions.
And this is where I get to jump in and say, hello, everyone. I'm going to help us moderate our Q&A today. And the thing I'm just thinking off the top of my head is, how has this experience changed the way that each of you think about running for office? And for everyone else here with burning questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you'd like to say them out loud, just raise your hand and I will let them know. I'll let you know to unmute and be able to share your question. And I'll remember to introduce myself as well. Hello, I am the other Delaney on this call. I am a graduate research assistant with 100 Rural Women. I've been with this organization since May of last year. We're coming up on a year, and I will be graduating in just a few short weeks. And this has been a pleasure to work with this organization as well as with this project. So I'll repeat my question. How has this experience changed the way that you three think about running for office?
Yeah, I can go first. I think it's just given me an incredible amount of respect for the women who serve in these offices. I have always thought highly of people who decide to go into public service, but I think the work that goes into campaigning, I just did not understand the scope of how much work these women are doing, and also how much they care about their communities and how selfless it truly is. I think sometimes public office gets a rap of people trying to do things that are good for them, but every woman I talked to was focused on benefiting their community for others and doing really incredible work. So I think it definitely shifted my perspective and gave me a lot of respect, and also I was just incredibly impressed.
Yeah, I'll second that it just provided so much perspective on the experiences that these women go through. And despite the lists and lists of barriers that they provided us, being able to overcome those and get into elected office, or even try a few times when that was needed, and the persistence that women have in being able to serve their communities and serve the greater good was just, so amazing to hear. And I work for a city, and this gave me perspective too on, the experiences that, our elected officials must go through on their journeys to elected office. And, as we kind of shared, that even when some people get into elected office, the barriers don't end there in terms of not knowing what to do once they actually get elected. And it's kind of made me think, what are the things that we could be doing from a staff side, working in public service. And it's been really helpful in that perspective too, and something I'll keep with me for a really long time.
Just to echo what my teammates have said, personally, it's changed the way I view what we call persistence and commitment to whatever job you're in. I have a huge respect for all the elected women I spoke to, and I think one of the main takeaways from speaking to them is that regardless of whatever you encounter, stay true to your why. That was one of the main things, and that's what I'm personally taking away from them, because it sounds it sounds really tough. They I think they are really, really strong women, and they do a really good job.
I got a question DM'd to me. Where did you hear in interviews the need for supporting individual women and changing structural pieces, in the systems they're engaging in?
Support for individual women. I think structurally, I think this was more of something that maybe private or not specifically government groups could do, but I think support in understanding campaigns. I think a lot of the women just had the desire to serve their community, but there were a lot of barriers around administrative stuff and making sure that they weren't breaking any laws when they were financing their campaign. And I think things like that that may seem basic to people who have been in politics are not basic to people who don't have that experience. And I think that is kind of an administrative structural thing that can be changed, and potentially the process could be made a little bit easier. But I also think there's room for places like 100 Rural Women to be able to step in and kind of make that process a little bit easier for women.
Another thing too, in terms of structure, I think a lot of the women said that they would have already been trying to help women get elected or supporting them if they knew who those people were. And there just isn't the infrastructure to be able to identify those women. And so I think that that's really important. And I think too, just in general, the persistence of gender stereotypes and sexism is still just part of our institutions, and that, I mean, over time it's getting better as more and more women do get elected and kind of unfortunately have to prove that they can do it. But I think that that's just something that culturally still persists and definitely is a big barrier, and that, I mean, it's just going to continue to take a long time to overcome.
And to just add to what Caitlyn shared, I think it's kind of similar. So one of the interviewees shared that she initially had like a really complex understanding of like how campaigns were run, and she assumed that it was such a huge thing for her. So taking that perception that like running for campaigns or like running for elected office is such a huge or tiresome or cumbersome deal would probably make it easier for more women to run.
Well, speaking about running, we have a question in the chat asking, are any of you considering running for office in the future? And I guess a good question is, how does this work fit into your future plans? Because I believe we all have graduates here, right?
I have one more class in the fall. I actually play on the soccer team, so I'm taking a little bit of an extended one, so I'm not graduating yet. But I don't think that running for office was necessarily something I had thought about before this project, but I think just seeing like how incredible these women are and the fact that there's such a lack of representation of women in office is something that definitely got me thinking about running for office. I don't have any don't have any plans right now, but I wouldn't say I'm opposed to it.
So this is officially your first ask then?
No, not that. I got hoping to go to law school, so got a little bit of time ahead of me.
Yep, I am graduating, which is really exciting. And I started a couple of months ago working as a city clerk. And so I don't have plans to run for office since I'm on the staff side of local government, but definitely this work still gives me really important perspective. And I think that there is an important intersection between elected officials and appointed officials in the progress of women going forward. So definitely something that will still stay with me despite not planning to run for office.
So I am not at the moment planning to run for office, but one thing that's made me like interested in this project in the first place was I used to be a teacher, and I realized that the young girls in my class were hesitant to take up any leadership roles. So I feel like being in this position has given me like more insight into like what it means to raise up or like teach or equip young girls to take up more leadership roles. So that's more where I'm leaning towards. So hopefully they won't have to be asked like 7 times before they say yes.
I love hearing that. I got another question messaged. In your literature review, did you find any resources that women or men use to support them to run for office, like community organizing skills?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, no. I think a lot of the literature that came up when we were, searching for things related to barriers or support for running for office or, mentorship and all of these things, there wasn't really much literature that we found that covered that topic. I mean, I think the literature really establishes what barriers exist, but not so much on how to overcome them. And so I do think that that's an area that the literature is lacking, at least in that what we found.
A follow-up to that then is, how will attendees today and other people be able to learn more about your work? Are there any products associated with this?
our professor is on this call very graciously, but we have been working on a report that we will be putting up on the 100 Real Women website, and that'll be available for anybody who wants to get a little bit more in-depth information on our project.
Another question I got messaged: what was your biggest takeaway individually from this project?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway was the energy and the commitment and the desire is out there. There's just a little bit of a gap between harnessing that energy and desire to help and serve their community and getting to where they want to go. And so that's where I think 100 Rural Women's mission is like really important and has identified that gap, because so many of the women we talked about just spoke, so highly about the impact that they're able to have on their community and wanting to support women get into more leadership positions. So I think the energy is there. We just have to figure out how to harness it.
I think for me, it was one comment that kind of ran through a lot of the interviews, which was most of the interviewees saying that they didn't think they had what it took to do the job. And it was so interesting that I had also had that like mindset that, oh, I don't think I'll be good enough to do that job or to apply to that place, so probably I shouldn't. But the fact that regardless of how they felt, they still went for it, I think has given me a lot of things to think about in regards to whenever I think that I can't do something, I should just go for it.
Yeah, I would say this is kind of the flip side of what Naa just said, but I think a few interviewees mentioned that they had to really find a way to balance their work and their home life, and that was kind of consistent. But a few mentioned that being in office takes a lot of time and it's a big commitment, and sometimes that means that you have to make decisions that you can't really do it all. And I think that's something that maybe isn't the most popular thing to say. I know like that's like not like women, like we want to be able to do everything, but sometimes that isn't always the case. And I think being able to make sure that women are prioritizing themselves in this whole process is something that I thought was really important.
Keep on sending questions. We're getting some more. What supports or ideas are out there to address the barrier of being a legislator with children? Being in rural Minnesota, rural female legislators don't have the option to be home for events and supper and bedtime.
Unfortunately, there weren't any specific formal ones that I heard of. I know that a few women who lived closer to the Capitol where they were able to commute did say that the actual building itself is friendly. They felt like they could bring their children in there and their children could be there. But for women whose children can't come to the building with them and they're missing out on that family time, missing out on suppers, bedtimes, there aren't necessarily formal supports for that. And I think that was again, where like you can't have both. And so that was definitely a struggle for some of the women that we interviewed.
Another question: is there any future research questions to go after barriers to women who run and aren't elected, such as do they run again or do they not, and why?
I think there definitely is a lot of room for future research. We've kind of viewed this as like a foundation for work that 100 Rural Women can continue. That is definitely an area that if we had had more time, it would have been interesting to learn more about the experiences of women who attempted to run and then were not successful. We talked to, I know at least one person who ran for a couple times and was super persistent, but just you know, the idea of being in a really small community where everybody felt like they knew her and had judgments about the type of leader she would be, since they had known her since she was a small child. And, you know, she was like, everybody just viewed me as a 12-year-old, even though I'm competent and have served on a different board and all of this. And so I think it's definitely an area of research that would be super beneficial to look into.
If Delaney and Naa Korkoi don't have anything to add, I also really want to highlight what Professor Gertis just shared in the chat, saying that the enthusiasm, energy, and personal commitment of these three shone through this entire project and absolutely shine today in sharing your information. I thank you for your time, your energy, and what you've done. And we're so thankful, absolutely, from the bottom of our hearts.